Greetings and salutations. I hope this finds you well wherever it finds you. Quick shout out to the two Uber comrades on Patreon supporting this channel, my content, my partner. Thank you, Rosa, and Independent Left News. Came across this really interesting, I can't say super surprising article at Mint Press News. The title is How the Pentagon Leaned on Hollywood to Sell the War in Afghanistan. We can see just so much pro-war, pro-U.S. imperialism propaganda being pushed by Hollywood and through, what is their name? Journalist Tom Secker was able to get all of this information from a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request that they shared with Mint Press News, and then Mccloud put out this really detailed and well, put together article detailing how Hollywood, how the Pentagon, U.S. military industrial complex used the Pentagon to push this pro-war messages in various Hollywood movies throughout the years in order to bolster support for the Afghanistan war, even though, the whole time all the higher ups, in the Pentagon and the U.S. government knew the war wasn't winnable, at all. And that's what the, Afghanistan papers documented. So I thought this was a, article worth sharing. And again, it's not just with Afghanistan. They're going to use that, the Pentagon's going to influence, Hollywood on all of these different issues. You're not going to see, any type of real strong, anti-war, anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist, films, at least, being produced by these major movie studios, because they're just in, lockstep with the Pentagon and the military industrial complex. And that's been true for quite some time, unfortunately, right? How the Pentagon Leaned on Hollywood to Sell the War in Afghanistan by Mccloud, I believe is how you pronounce that last name. The official 20-year occupation of Afghanistan has come to a close, with the military beating a hasty and ignominious retreat. The puppet Afghan government NATO installed lasted fewer than 2 weeks on its own, with President Ashraf Ghani fleeing to the United Arab Emirates, allegedly with around 169 million in cash. Obviously, it's not a huge fucking surprise that the government was toppled in, less than 2 weeks, given how completely corrupt it was, right? Just look at, the former president as example. If the occupation was so unpopular and weak, how was it able to last so long? The Afghanistan papers, which trove of military documents leaked to the WAPO, showed that high-ranking government officials knew that the war was unwinnable, but were openly lying to the public about how it was going, all while NGOs and military contractors made billions. And, that's obviously one of the reasons they wanted to keep it going. They wanted to make sure the Raytheons, the Boeings, the General Dynamics were, kept being well fed from it, the war effort, the occupation. But documents obtained by journalist Tom Secker under the FOIA Act, shared with Mint Press News, show how Hollywood also played a significant role, knowingly collaborating with the Pentagon to produce pro-war propaganda about Afghanistan, ultimately helping to officially buoy public opinion on the unwinnable campaign. This typically included giving the Pentagon direct editorial control over scripts, and even removing any anti-war content or scenes that would show the military in a negative light. In exchange, the military offered its human resources, its bases, locations for filming, and its wide range of high-tech vehicles to be used in movies. The quid pro quo effectively turned much of Hollywood and the entertainment industry more generally into cheerleaders for imperialism. So it's, you scratch my back, you hide, U.S. war crimes, you don't show us, in a negative or, let's say, accurate light, then you're going to have access to our bases, all this cool equipment. So you see, it's not a big deal. Just wash over all these war crimes, pretend it didn't happen. Nothing to see here. The military industrial media complex. Reading through the documents, what becomes clear is the sheer scale of the military's involvement in the silver screen and in pop culture more generally. For instance, between 2015 and 2017, the U.S. Army's Office of the Chief of Public Affairs West, OCPA-W, based just outside of Hollywood, was generally working on between 40 and 70 entertainment media projects at one time. The OCPA-W is one of 3 Army regional offices, the others being in Chicago and New York. The Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and CIA and other government orgs all have similar agencies and programs aimed at manipulating their image in mass media. OCPA-W's weekly summary of its affairs for the week of December 22nd, 2016, for example, notes that is involved in 63 working projects, 15 in pre-production, 26 in production, and 22 in post-production. According to research by Secker and Matthew Alford for their 2017 book, National Security Cinema, the Department of Defense has supported at least 814 movies and 11,133 separate TV shows, the majority of those in recent years. Whew. Staggering scale, but again, not surprising when the U.S. military gets almost $1 trillion a year. And this is just, some of the fucked up shit they're using it for, to whitewash their, war crimes to their buddies in Hollywood and cinema. Afghanistan is generally far from American minds. This is by design. Few at the top of American society want the public to be scrutinizing U.S. actions. Again, yes, completely. Because if we actually knew what was going on, if we would be giving an honest and accurate portrayal of all the fucked up things the United States is doing all over the world, including Afghanistan, then we might, be putting pressure to end these occupations, end these wars. But that's why this obfuscation by Hollywood and the military-industrial complex happens, because you don't want the veil to be lifted. When the country is portrayed on American screens, the military works extremely hard to present the war in the most conducive to its interest. Hollywood has been a willing collaborator in this. Below is a selection of case studies of movies about or featuring the war in Afghanistan, and discussion about how the U.S. military has had those movies sanitized before they even met the public eye. 12 Strong. I haven't seen that movie, have you? 12 Strong is a jingoistic action film based on a true story about a small unit of 12 U.S. Special Forces who invaded Afghanistan immediately after September 11th attacks, thus being the first American boots on the ground of a 2-decade campaign that cost the lives an estimated 176,000 Afghans, displacing almost 6 million more. The film entails the elite group attempting to capture the city of Mazar-e-Sharif before NATO forces arrive. The team, so they say, is outnumbered by 50,000 Taliban and Al-Qaeda forces. That's obviously all bullshit. If the two were close, yeah, right? This is despite the fact the Taliban immediately condemned the 9/11 attacks at the Western and that Western estimates put Al-Qaeda's global force at the time below 100 members. Yes. The only thing the war on terror did was act as a, really, really fertile recruiting grounds for, Al-Qaeda and these other, radical, jihadist forces. If we don't take that time, the World Trade Center is just beginning, says one of the heroes of the film, whose tagline is 12 soldiers gave us a reason to hope. Documents show that the military is eager to help with such a nationalistic film and match what they call productive companies' breathtaking lists of asks, including access to a number of military bases in New Mexico for shooting, army uniforms for actors, target vehicles that could blow up, the hire a number of aircraft, including Chinook Seahawk helicopters, and appropriate Soviet tanks for the enemy to use. They also aided the company in finding military extras to appear in minor roles. So there you see, what Hollywood, what these media companies are getting out of it, access to all these resources, and then the military industrial complex, the Pentagon, gets editorial control. Like, no, let's rewrite that. You're actually kind of pointing out some of the fucked up shit we did. Let's just say the Afghans did that and not us, that type of shit. Despite the movie's strongly pro-war message, the OCPA-W Air Force and other military orgs still insist on going through the script with a fine-tooth comb. moving even minor details it did not like. This included demanding that writers change their plans to present the 12 soldiers as rugged men with full beards and tattoos. An email from OCPA. I mean, Jesus Christ. My other concern is that during the loadout sequences at Fort Campbell that occurred shortly after 9/11, our soldiers did not have full length beards and neck tattoos. That came later, I hope. Guys are going to shave for those sequences. I hope guys are going to shave. A few weeks later, seemingly minor point had not been resolved, and to show just how much control over creative direction military had, the OCPA threatened to pull out the movie, reminding the production company of the agreement they had signed. Wow. Production company agrees to cast actors, extras, double stunt personnel portraying military men and women who conform to individual military service regs governing age, height, weight, uniform, grooming, appearance, and conduct standards. DoD reserves the right to suspend support in the event that disagreement regarding the military aspects of the portrayal cannot be resolved in negotiation between the production company and DoD. With the 72-hour cure period, the DoD project officer will provide written guidance specific to military service being. I mean, Jesus Christ. The Department of Defense is well aware that the sort of assistance they offer, free equipment, filming locations, etc., be enormously expensive, for sure. Not impossible to otherwise obtain. Therefore, they leverage their considerable influence into what amounts to control over every aspect of a movie or TV show they work on. I think it's hard to argue otherwise. Just look at that above example, right? This often means jettisoning reality in favor of a relentlessly pro-war message. Emails show that OCPA instructed the production company to change the minor criminal backstory of one of the 12 soldiers, despite the fact that it was perfectly real. So literally rewriting history, rewriting what actually took place to fit, the Pentagon's pro-war, pro-U.S. imperialism, pro-U.S. exceptionalism message, right? 12 of them are two basic issues with the background story captain being any fucking new guy, derogatory military term for recruits when he was actually a team leader for 2 years, and the comment about sergeant having a choice between jail and the army. According to the book, the bar fight did happen. Was able to play it down a misdemeanor probation period. It did lose his job as school teacher. Production quickly agreed to changes a few weeks later, sending a new script for the OCPA and Air Force's approval. Here's a revised draft of Horse Soldiers. They replied, "We change backstory per your suggestion. Please let me know if this works." I mean, Jesus, look how conciliatory they have to be, but it's not surprising, right? Because the Pentagon, as Mccloud was talking about, holds, they have access to these bases, the uniforms, the army vehicles, etc. Like, if you don't comply, we're going to take all that shit away. So they comply. None of the military's demands appear to have caused much resistance from the company. Indeed, towards the end of filming, a senior member of the team even emailed the OCPA and the Office of Secretary of Defense to offer his profound gratitude. Jesus. So there's them tweeting about it. That was back in 2018. Lone survivor. It's largely a true story of a Navy SEAL. Based on this guy's book. Time Luttrell's book reads like the manifesto of a white nationalist mass shooter and is peppered throughout with this seething hatred of liberals. Luttrell is extremely regretful that he, along with the decision to let the Afghans go and not stick to his gut feeling, insists they murdered an old man and 2 children are unarmed. Jesus. It was the stupidest, most southern fried lamb brain decision I ever made in my life, he wrote. I turned into a fucking liberal, half-assed and logic nitwit, all heart, no brain. By way of explanation, he said it's certainly that the liberal media would betray the troops, side with the Taliban that made release them. Jesus Christ. Apologizing for not carrying out what amounts to war crime. Situation might look simple in Washington when the human rights of terrorists are often given high priority. That's not true. I am certain liberal politicians would defend their position to the death because everyone knows liberals have never been wrong about anything, can ask them anytime. This book is a glorification, supposedly righteous violence against a subhuman component. As he explains, in the global war on terror, we have rules and our opponents use them against us. We try to be reasonable. They will stop at nothing. They will stoop to any form of base of warfare, torture, beheading, mutilation. I mean, that's what literally the U.S. is doing, all that shit there, right? Attacks on innocent civilians. The U.S. is doing that. A little bit of projection there, maybe. The original script stayed close to Luttrell's interpretation of events. Needless to say, however, the military demanded major rewrites. In the finished version, the Navy SEAL commander simply decides to let the goat herders go with no argument about whether to kill them and hide their bodies. Certainly no long soliloquies, that's a good word, about the treachery of the liberal media, as happens in this book. Military often claims they aid in the film industry to merely ensure depictions of themselves are more accurate. Yet, reading through 131 pages declassified emails between them and production company Film 44, it's clear that is not the case. Indeed, Philip Strub, the Department of Defense Chief Hollywood Liaison, made this explicit writing in now declassified email. While maximizing historical authenticity is our mandate, we share responsibility for the reputations of the four SEALs and their families' memories of them. Jesus Christ. Oh, man. There's some of the movies they worked on. Jesus, look at that. Rules of Engagement. Tomorrow Never Dies, a Bond movie. True Lies. Transformers. The Messenger. Iron Man. Wind Talkers. Script review and vetting, production department consulting, talent training, on-set coaching. In exchange for what amounts to total content control, the military provided lone survivors producers with the use of Kirtland Air Force Base in Iraq and sending party in New Mexico that could easily pass for Afghanistan, the use of multiple expensive aircraft, including Black Hawk and Apache helicopters, parachute jumpers, and other general military personnel. Charlie Wilson's War. Charlie Wilson's War tells the story of the eponymous Texas politician, most famously for being the driving force behind Operation Cyclone, the CIA's funding and training of the Afghan Mujahideen, an action that also turned the country into the world's largest heroin producer. The original script did not portray Wilson or his endeavors especially sympathetically, explicitly noting how he was supporting extremists like bin Laden's Al Qaeda. One of these ultra radicals was Gulbuddin Hekmatyar. Apologize if I'm mispronouncing that. Brutal warlord, widely accused of starting the trend of throwing acid in women's faces. Yep. Throughout the original script, 9/11 was presented as a foreseeable consequence of the U.S. decision to power these violent fanatics. Indeed, the original end scene took place at the Pentagon on September 11th, with Wilson hearing the deafening screech of an airliner hitting the building. However, all this Al Qaeda Hekmatyar and 9/11 scene was cut from the script after the CIA reviewed it. Instead, the finished film ends with Wilson receiving a medal for his services to freedom in Afghanistan. Also removed was a scene discussing the Sabra and Shatila massacres, where the Israeli-backed forces slaughtered hundreds, if not thousands, of Palestinian refugees. Excuse me. Earlier versions of the script also portrayed the Soviets somewhat sympathetically, with one character noting that Soviet atrocities in Afghanistan, including forcing them, Afghans, to learn to read and write. This was also cut in favor of portraying Soviet soldiers as brutal and unthinking monsters slaughtering the local population. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the socialist government in Kabul at the time had actually asked for the Soviets' help. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, comedy drama, something of a flop at the box office. Still, it managed to reduce losses significantly by filming at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, just as Lone Survivor did, and using U.S. Marines as extras. In exchange, producers handed over significant editorial control, it seems to be a theme, of the story of the military, which insisted on changing a scene where U.S. military truck crashed into a crowd of civilians. Find a movie, there are no images of this, and the incident is referred only to a 20-second news segment that describes it merely as a fatal traffic accident involving a coalition truck. Crash was a real incident. Of course it was. Can't actually, depict what actually is happening and the horrors that are being committed by, the U.S. empire. 2006, the truck plowed through Kabul during rush hour, killing at least 3 civilians and injuring many others. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot is based on American journalist Kim Barker's memoir, The Taliban Shuffle. Incident plays a major role in her book at the point where she finally understood how pointless and unwinnable the war was, how there was no accountability for the rich and powerful and no justice for the have-nots. She's right. She described it in the following: anti-U.S. riots as major breaking point in Afghanistan, the time when we first saw just how angry some Afghans were, just how ripe the country was for a Taliban comeback, and just how leaderless Afghanistan really was. Yet in the movie, the crash is mentioned only in passing, making the rioting Afghans appear irrationally angry and violent, a typical stereotype of Afghan war films. Iron Man. Original Iron Man script was decidedly pacifist, with protagonist Tony Stark attempting to use his enormous manufacturing empire to battle against war profiteers in the military-industrial complex. However, the Pentagon got involved with Philip Schrubb again, acting as the military liaison. The tone of the movie is radically altered. Much of the fighting in the movie takes place in modern-day Afghanistan, with the U.S. military serving the role of the good guys. In this sense, the film's stance on war reverse. An exchange of production agreement notes that the military would allow the movie to be shot at Edwards Air Force Base just north of LA, provides approximately 150 extras at Edwards Air Force Base to play military members from various services and Afghan nationals, help produce around 100 uniforms, and provide the opportunity to use a range of expensive. So they got a lot in return for handing over, more or less, editorial control to the Pentagon. Tom Secker, when asked by Mint Press News to assess U.S. film's industry role in prolonging the Afghan war, responded, "Hollywood's coverage of NATO's war in Afghanistan has been notable by its absence, its silence, and its use of contextless microcosms which represent the war rather than the explore explain it. Iron Man and Lone Survivor, two Pentagon-supported blockbusters, are both set during the U.S. occupation, but the scale of that occupation, the mess it was making the country, ignored by both narratives in favor of tightly focused cinematic synodoches, which conveniently avoid the suffering of everyone involved." Secker concluded, "In that sense, of course, Hollywood has played a crucial role in perpetuating war. They either failed to remind people the war is still going on or painted it in heroic, decontextualized colors that make it seem like a benevolent adventure halfway around the world, rather than the crushing, destructive geopolitical rat fuck it truly is." On point. It's not just big budget Hollywood movies that the Pentagon works on. However, practically every medium is used to spread pro-war message. I mean, look at fucking, take the case of football games, American football, not, what football is known as globally, how militarized that fucking shit is with the flyovers, the ridiculous, that bullshit with the anthem. Declassified documents show that the Army flew Schwarzenegger to Afghanistan for global warming documentary TV series Years of Living Dangerously. This was laughable in effort to present the U.S. military as singles. Yes, how just completely just ironic and just really disgusting way the U.S. military flying Schwarzenegger there for this global warming documentary. As Mccloud points out, U.S. military is the single largest fucking polluter in the world. Want to address climate change? Kind of important to have life on this planet. We need to dismantle the military fucking industrial complex. Likewise, pop culture is full of strategically inserted pro-war messages. For instance, declassified documents show that the OCPA-W carefully placed uniformed service members in opportune spots in the audience and game show The Price is Right. Oh my God. The military, here we go. Look, I was just alluding to NFL. Perfect. Military pays the NFL millions of dollars to put troops on the field or fly aircraft, as I was talking about, over the stadium before big football games, turning the entire event into a recruitment drive. Also has a video games team called U.S. Army Esports, helping associate the military with the fun in the minds of the children, or to get them conditioned to being okay with death by remote control, i.e. drones. They also been accused of using the same grooming techniques pedophiles use, only recruit children into joining the war machine. Look at that. Grooms teens. And Major General Frank Muth, head of Army recruiting the Army Esports Project, openly explains how their sinister strategy of having recruiters on Twitch in a clandestine and subversive manner grooms. I mean, just fucking disgusting. Can't get healthcare, can't get, living wage, can't get tuition for college, can't get student loan debt canceled. But yeah, here, Army, get as much money as you need to brainwash young people into thinking that joining the Army is a good idea and that the U.S. empire is some force for good. Meanwhile, the music video for pop star Katy Perry's song "Part of Me" was shot at Camp Pendleton military base in California. Shows Perry getting over a bad breakup by joining the Marine. The training process shows her finding herself again and growing as an individual. When Fox News asked Perry's team if they had been paid by the military for the video, they refused that, meaning that they did. Video currently has 887 million views on YouTube. The whole videography is straight out of Nazi filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl. The same angled, here rising upward shots, the same fetishization of physical power of gleaming armaments, and the rigor and mechanism of human beings cohering into living militarized units, wrote feminist critic Naomi Wolf, who labeled the song war propaganda. The news is also filled with former high-ranking military officials who play the role of neutral expert. Yes. While sticking laser-like to pro-war talking points, helping to give cable news coverage on the conflict a decidedly jingoistic bent. What these documents ultimately underline is the deep interlocking connection between Hollywood and the national security state. Few Americans experience the war from close up. Yep, very disconnect and detached for a reason. Again, if we actually knew what was being done to all these people all over the world with U.S. tax dollars, the murder, the occupation, the torture, the corruption, etc., we would have a stronger reaction where more people would be opposed to these type of fucked up things. We're kept in the dark for a reason, right? Even fewer realize that depictions of the conflict come heavily mediated through the military in hundreds of films and TV shows. Every single word and image has been closely scrutinized and signed off by senior military figures, all in the effort to convince viewers into supporting deadly and grossly immoral campaigns around the world. Long ago, the military realized the power of Hollywood. It's high time Americans realized that when watching movies and TV shows about war, all too often they are not seeing neutral acts of art, but carefully constructed pieces of national security propaganda. That was from, again, Alan Mccloud at Mint Press News. Mint Press News does great work, as does Alan Mccloud. I'll link that down below. Again, like I said at the start of this isn't surprising to me if you actually, have consumed any of this, content from Hollywood that was based on, the U.S. and war and intervention and imperialism. You can see that, influence that Hollywood has, because it goes that same script that Alan Mccloud, laid out there in such excruciating detail. So you gotta, if you consume that type of content, make sure you filter it through a lens and realize, no, they're probably feeding me bullshit. It may look, very nice and well put together, and the cinematography may, be very, of a high caliber, but it's just more pro-war, pro-imperialism, pro-U.S., American exceptionalism bullshit, and you need to filter it through that lens. Even though it may be entertaining, they're feeding you war propaganda, right? Like the video if you like the video. Subscribe for more content. All part of the people. Peace. Much love.